ministers should rethink.
Here we are on Regent Street, where it crosses Oxford Street.
Bar anyone who arrives in the UK via unauthorised routes from ever becoming a British citizen. They were introduced earlier this week. Ms Creasy says the policy is a counterproductive move.
The people who we let stay here, two-thirds of the people on those boats
Selfridges, basically.
have a well-founded fear of persecution. The question is what happens then? What this does is it closes off a route to citizenship. I just don't think the British public are in that space that if we have said that somebody can stay, we don't ever want to see them being part of our community.
The Home Office says the guidance further strengthens measures already in place. Concerns are growing that fighting in Gaza could resume in the coming days. Israel's Prime Minister has demanded Hamas release an unspecified number of hostages by Saturday at noon. Analysts say Benjamin Netanyahu has been deliberately vague in his request. Britain's chief rabbi has told LBC that tackling anti-Semitism in the Labour Party remains a work in progress. The comments from Sir Ephraim Mervis follow the sacking of Minister Andrew Gwynn over a leaked WhatsApp group. It reportedly contained anti-Semitic and other offensive comments. Sir Ephraim has welcomed Labour's decision to sanction MPs and councillors caught up in this scandal.
We have continuously praised the Labour Party for the steps that have been taken under the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer, significant changes and many improvements, but the job has not totally been accomplished.
A man has been arrested following a 36-hour standoff with armed police in Sheffield. Officers were called to a disturbance in the city centre on Monday evening. LBC's reporter Alex Taylor-Brown has more.
It led to Sheffield Parkway being closed in both directions, as well as the Park Square roundabout. This morning, a 47-year-old man was detained on suspicion of possession of a firearm, a fray, making threats to kill, criminal damage, and communicating a bomb hoax. The apartment block remains closed while searches are carried out.
Thames Water is facing an investigation by the regulator Ofwat over its environmental record. There are concerns it'll fail to complete more than 100 upgrade schemes funded by bill payers. The firm's about £16 billion in debt. In the city, the FTSE 100 a short time ago was up a point at 87.77. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.19. LBC weather staying quite cold and cloudy for many, with brighter spells in the north and west, a high of 9 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watt.
February. Time to fall in love. With a brand new Skoda. Trade flowers for funds with £1,000 towards your finance deposit. And who needs chockies when there's 0% APR
I literally
Solutions PCP?
give up telling these people they're going to get run over. I'm actually giving up with it.
28th of February. Visit your local Skoda retailer today.
Natural
Exclude
selection.
battery electric vehicles, maximum 24-month term. Indemnities may be required. Skoda Finance.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Lewis Goodall.
Time is 11:04. Lewis Goodall sitting in for James O'Brien here on LBC. A divisive last hour in all sorts of different ways, but I think Phil from Bicester may have finally found the sentiment and the policy that can bring us all together as a nation. What we need, Phil says, is more cheesecake. Well, it's a view. Thanks, Phil. We're talking now to Peter Dow, the Labour MP for Bootle. Before we get to him, let me just explain what he and some of his colleagues are trying to do. As I was saying before the news, dozen Labour MPs pushing ministers to introduce a 4-day working week as part of the government's overhaul of workers' rights, about which we've heard much since the government came to power. These backbenchers supported an amendment to the Employment Rights Bill, spearheaded by the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, of course. This is an amendment backed currently by a dozen Labour MPs, as I say, and one Green Party. And it would commit the government to setting up a body to look into bringing in a 4-day working week across the economy. 4-day working week, they say, is the future of work. Well, let's talk to Peter Dow now, Labour MP for Bootle, putting forward the amendment, joining us from Parliament. Peter, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I suppose MPs already work a 4-day week in Parliament, at least, don't they? So you would just be sort of rolling it out to the rest of the country. Why do you want to do this?
Well,
Members of Parliament also, I know it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek.
I know, it's a joke. It was a joke, Peter. A bit of a
I know
cheap
it's a
shot.
bit of a tongue-in-cheek there. So, the 5-day week was introduced over 100 years ago. In fact, Ford Motor Company was who really initiated it and introduced it. What they found at the time, that there was more productivity, less absenteeism, better retention, and in a sense the dial hasn't moved in terms of the working week for over 100 years. And it's time to move the dial on, and that's what this amendment is about. It's trying to get the debate going about a potential 4-day week. So this is part of that ongoing debate in relation to this particular issue.
It is true, isn't it? We'll get into the sort of practicalities of it in a moment, but it is true, actually, if we take the, you've alluded to it, Peter, but we take the sort of slightly longer view. We sort of think about the 5-day working week as a kind of almost sort of fixed part of our political life, our economic life. Of course, that never used to be the case. It used to be a 6-day week, and indeed, some of the first sort of campaigns on this by the Chartists and others were about having what we now call a weekend, although they wouldn't have called it that then.
Yes, but it's also part of the ongoing movement in terms of employment rights. You know, things like in 1938 we had the paid leave for the first time. People didn't think about why should you get paid when you're on leave. So that was a movement. The Equal Pay Act, minimum wage. So we had this sequential and moving of the dial over the years, and a whole range of employment rights for workers.
Let's talk about the practicalities of it, though, Peter. We have got, in this country, a deep productivity problem. It's one of the main drivers of our lack of growth. This is a long-standing problem. How do you think that reducing by a fifth the amount of time that workers are at work is going to help our productivity issues?
Well, over 200 companies in the UK with 5,000 workers have permanently adopted the 4-day week with no loss of pay to 32 hours. So many companies have already tested it out. I mean, there's a suggestion that there's potentially...
See, I don't think I'm allowed to use this lane.
There are already hundreds of thousands potentially workers doing a 4-day week. So in a sense, this is...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed in the bike lane, but you're not getting fined for it.
Look, I don't have all the answers to the questions. What I'm trying to do is to say we have to have a debate about a 4-day week. AI is coming along, technologies are moving on, and it's time for us to have the debate about this. And what my amendment does is to try to set up a forum where we can do that.
How would you ensure that, say, for example, you're running a factory and you have to have certain commitments to in terms of the output that you're producing. You're currently working a shift pattern where a 5-day working week is the norm. You can't necessarily afford because your margins
taxis
are
just follow me
modest
through there, so
you can't afford to take on
as have
staff.
other cars.
How can you ensure? Can you be sure?
I'm pretty sure I'm allowed.
That moving to a 4-day week.
It's a broken line. It's definitely not a bus lane.
Imagine how it might work with services.
So I'm saying I'm good for that.
Well, I suspect it can because it's already been trialled out in a whole range of areas, whether it's the advertising and PR sector, the technology sector, IT and software, consulting management, engineering and manufacturing. So it's already been trialled in this country and in other countries, and it has worked. And the majority of those companies that try it out tend to stick with the 4-day week. And I'm not telling the company how it should run its business, what its hours should be. What I'm trying to say, as part of the ongoing movement, this moving the dial, is that we have to have a debate about this. That's what we've got to do. That's what I'm trying to get. So I'm not telling an organisation and to a company why they must do this, that, and the other. They must organise the 32-hour week, the 4-day week in a particular way. Just trying to say to them, the debate's got to be had. It has been developed in the countries. It has been developed and moved on in companies here. So the idea that it doesn't work right across the board is not true. The evidence is there to show that.
Isn't it the truth, though, Peter, that in reality, particularly with flexible working, particularly since that pandemic where people work from home more, digital working and so on, that in many respects, we have a 4-day working week across many industries, in effect, de facto, at the moment. I mean, if you go to a lot of cities on a Friday, for example, Friday evening, you'll see that by comparison to the rest of the week, it's now some of the quietest days of the week, because particularly for service workers, not true in different industries, but certainly for service workers, which are a lot of the economy, and office workers and so on, it sort of happened by default.
Well, in a sense, we can't have it both ways. We can't have the people who are saying it won't work and then in the next breath saying, oh, well, we've already got it de facto. My point is that we've got it de facto, and I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying we have, but we don't. What we've got to do is to say things have moved on. COVID showed that. Who would have thought before COVID that you would have millions of people working from home throughout the day, weekends, etc., etc. People would have said that was nonsense. We're not going to do that. We were forced into doing it by events. We've been forced into doing this by a whole range of reasons over the years. Why don't we just move along this voluntarily instead of having been forced every time by events and circumstances into this, as happened, as you referred to, with the Charters movement, as happened with the minimum wage, as happened with paid leave? Why do we have to fight against this all the time? And the final point for me on this particular issue, we got told when the minimum wage was introduced, the economy would be bankrupt. Well, it hasn't happened, has it? And who would turn the clock back to not having a minimum wage?
What's your view generally about the status of the Workers' Rights Bill? And obviously it was much hailed by the government when Angela Rayner was in opposition, said it was an absolute priority. There's been a lot of cries from business about it and about the effect it could have. Do you think it goes far enough?
Well, I think ever the way with employment rights, they work on the basis of a step-by-step approach, see how things operate, see how things work out. And I think this is a really good start. And my amendment is trying to move that on further, to have the debate. This is about having the debate. We can close the debate down, try to close the debate down, but it won't. So why not just move on with it? Why not engage with it? And I think that's the whole point about the Employment Rights Bill as well.
Is there a danger, though, that if you were to do it, that you end up having a situation from some employers, and I don't know if you've thought about how you might mitigate against this, or if there is even a way to mitigate against it, but that you basically end up sort of shoveling 5 days worth of work into 4 days, which some people might find attractive and appealing because you get the extra day, but some people actually might find far more stressful and far more difficult, because it basically means that you're frenzied in 4 days rather than having a decent length of work over 5.
It's a really valid point, and I think some of the organisations who've trialled this out managed to do 4 days with the 32 hours in practical terms within that 4 days, and actually it's been more productive. You've got to take it in the round. Retention is better, so you're not waiting to fill posts. Recruitment is better, and people want to work for these sort of companies. Overall absenteeism goes down. So in practical terms, what you have situation, but really we just need to have the debate. Let's have the debate instead of closing it down.
Peter Dowd there, the Labour MP for Bootle, has put forward this amendment. No sign from the government yet that they're particularly keen on the idea. What Minister has said, Alex Norris, the Building Safety Minister, has said that wasn't in our manifesto. It isn't the policy for the government. We don't support that. Again, part of our plan for change is a really significant step up in employment rights, the best in a generation. That 4-day week is not part of that, but nevertheless, we're really going to deliver to all for workers. So that's the approach we'll be taking. I want to talk to you about whether you think the idea of a 4-day working week is a good idea, about whether you agree with Peter Dowd and these other Labour MPs that actually, yeah, okay, we've got a productivity problem, but that shows that we've got a productivity problem now under a 5-day working week, and that maybe the benefits that you get in terms of workers being able to disconnect, workers being able to spend more time with their families, workers having more flexibility over their lives, not just being tied presenteeism style to an office, is better, and it gives you something. Or maybe you are a business, maybe you've tried this or thought about it, and you're just thinking this would just be the latest example of basically British workers not wanting to work as much as they did before the pandemic, and that it would make our productivity problem even worse. If you're a business owner, interested in particular to hear from you about how you think a 4-day working week would work, and whether you've tried it already. 0345 6060 973 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. If you call now, you will get through. Lewis Goodall sitting in for James O'Brien and LBC. The time is 11:15.
This is LBC.
Imagine your dream holiday made possible by comparing cheap flights on Kayak Walking on an unspoilt goes on for miles beach on the Sardinian coast, plunging into the splendour of an idyllic lagoon in Greece. Ah, yes, this is the life. All you have to do is actually book it. Don't holidays. Use Kayak to compare prices from hundreds of travel sites and airlines to find your dream deal. Search Kayak and go see for yourself.
Last year, over 100,000 people saved money at Discount Dragon. They bought a Coke Zero 4-pack for just 1p, Victor and Raw fragrance for $34.99, 24 Snickers for $2.99 and Fairy Liquid for just a penny. But the rest of you missed out. Discount Dragon buys surplus stock and turns it into spectacular savings. So this year, don't miss out. Save now at discountdragon.co.uk. Sold prices from 2024. Brands and stocks vary. 18 plus restrictions apply. See website for details.
Look around. Life can be surprisingly simple. Mobile GPS, power steering, your devoted dishwasher. But your savings are another story. Every savings account you open means more paperwork, more admin. But now, you'll never need to apply for a savings account again. With Flagstone, you can open and manage hundreds of accounts from over 60 banks, all in one place, with one password. Sign up in minutes today. Flagstone. Smart saving. Surprisingly simple. Minimum deposit £10,000. Eligibility criteria apply.
This Chinese New Year, embrace new beginnings with BYD, the brand trusted by over 4 million drivers last year. Join us at BYD's New Year sales event and enjoy 0% finance on all BYD cars, plus a complimentary first service on orders placed by 17th of February. Don't wait. Transform your drive today. Visit BYD.com to find your nearest store. Terms and conditions valid over 36 months with minimum 40% deposit.
Lewis Goodall on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Time is 11:17. Text here from Helen says, I love the idea of a 4-day working week, but as a self-employed sole trader, how am I supposed to be able to walk as many dogs in 4 days as 5 days? It simply isn't possible. Or am I supposed to convince my 36 different households customers to all somehow have the same day off each week? How? Great idea, but simply not feasible for many jobs. Helen, the dog walker there from Manchester. I suppose one of the ideas is to try and prevent something that I think people we know from the studies is more and more a part of the modern economy, particularly with our phones and digital life and being available, not just at the office or our place of work, which is burnout, and that maybe this is a problem that it could solve. For what it's worth, I mean, it has been trialled in a few places. In 2022, there was a trial in the UK, 61 companies, 2,900 workers. And the results were pretty positive. So 39% of employees said they felt less stressed, 71% had reduced burnout, 54% found it easier to balance work and life, and 92% of the firms involved with the study continued with a 4-day week after the trial and found that their business revenues remained stable or increased. And they found it was easier to attract and retain talent, which is quite interesting. Again, it's clear it could only perhaps work for certain industries. Maybe, but it was pretty effective in that study. How big a problem do you think burnout is, and do you think the 4-day working week could be the way of addressing it? 0345 6060 973. Let's talk to Alex, who is Leon C. Alex, what do you want to say on this?
Good morning, Lewis.
Good morning.
Just a quick example. I totally agree with what you just said about industry specific, and I'll tell you for why. I work in the aviation business.
Right.
Now, that's a 24/7 industry, and I'll give you an example of this further. The company I work for, I do a 7-day on, 3-day off, 7-day on, 4-day off working roster. Now, if that were applied to the business I work in, that would lead to one of two things. Either the carriers would have to employ goodness knows how many more people, or they would start laying people off. As I said, it's industry specific. The 4-day working week in the business I work in is simply not feasible. End of story. And aviation is totally driven by money and profit, and it's as simple as that. It's a game of bums on seats.
Alex, you know, it's interesting you say that, because it reminds me of something that I always find, and I always found this during the pandemic. Do you find that, you know, particularly in terms of the public conversation, politics, media and so on, we often talk as if, like, everyone works in an office. It's like I remember, you know, during the pandemic, we'd always be talking about everyone getting back to the office and how to adopt office work and everything like that.
Sure.
This is a big part of the population. People like to decry British manufacturing, but the truth is, still about 10 to 15% of our economy. Lots of people work in factories, and we never really ever seem to talk about those people or those industries when we're talking about ideas like this.
No, I agree with you. We don't seem to recognise people that work in different situations that can't be governed by a 4-day week. And I understand what you're saying about offices. That's a slightly different kettle of fish. If you're doing a specific Monday to Friday 5-day week with your weekends off, then I'm sure that the companies would be able to accommodate a 4-day week. That's a slightly different ballgame. But when you've got an industry that is that works literally 24/7 pretty much. I mean, I spent 20 years in air traffic before I worked for the carrier that I currently work for, and that was 24/7 as well. So I am being industry specific, but I do take on board your point about the fact that we don't seem to discuss our manufacturing industry workers or office workers per se in the same vein. But as I said, I just think personally it has to be industry specific, and it's a nonsense of an idea to try and apply it to certain other businesses. You take the medical profession. Now, that's the only non-privatised industry I can think of where you've got situations where people are working some bananas hours, i.e. 60, 70 hours a week. And again, it's 24/7. A&E doesn't shut at 5 o'clock on a Friday night. It doesn't work that way.
There is a problem though, isn't there, Alex, with burnout? And we know this from all of the studies, the sort of workplace of time series studies that we see, that burnout, and I suspect it's largely because of digital life, has become so much more intense and has become so much worse. People sort of being at work even when they're at home and all of that sort of thing. I mean, what do you think the answer to that is, and how big a problem do you think it is?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, pressures get to us all, and I mean, I saw that in the business of air traffic control. That's extremely pressurised, and that was commonplace for guys in their 50s to retire early because of the fact that it's not that they couldn't hack it. They were extremely good and professional at their jobs. And again, I'm sorry if I sound as though it's industry specific, but it has to be in my case. But I do agree with you. There's a lot of professions that do burn out, and the medical